Get started at 7 o'clock. All right, 7 o'clock, we're called a meeting to order. This is the December 4th meeting of 2018 of the Village of Oxford Planning Commission. A regularly scheduled meeting at this time. If you'll please, as always, stand with me and pay our respects to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. All right. Madam Secretary, if you'd be kind enough to call roll this evening.
Sure. Pilak, here. Douglas.
Here.
D.
Here.
Curtis, absent. Bama.
Here.
Alma.
Here.
And Johnson is not here either.
I'll
He's
make a
absent.
motion to excuse Jack Curtis from the regular meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, I have a motion on the table to excuse the absence of Jack Curtis tonight, who has made his intentions well known beforehand. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Adam Johnson has submitted his resignation. I'll discuss that in a few moments. I would like to have a motion to approve this evening's agenda, which is before you.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Madam Secretary, once again, I have a motion on the table to approve tonight's agenda for the December 4th, 2018 regular meeting. As submitted, I have motion and support for that. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Good, we have an approved agenda for this evening. Thank you very much, Commissioners. I would also like to have a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on November 20th, 2018. I believe those were distributed to you in an email package. They are not in front of us this evening, but those have been submitted via email.
If there's no questions, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the November 20th, 2018 regular meeting.
All right, thank you very much. Any second on that?
Support.
Good. Madam Secretary, I have a motion to approve this evening's, a previous minutes from our meeting held November 20th of this year. I have a motion and a support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Good, thank you very much for that. We do have one bit of correspondence tonight. I've received a letter from Commissioner Johnson, who's respectfully requested to resign from the commission. He cites personal reasons and need to attend to matters of importance to him. And so certainly from speaking myself, we wish him the greatest and best going forward and thank him for his support. Could I have a motion to accept that
To
letter?
receive and file the correspondence with regrets.
All right. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
All right, Madam Secretary. I have a motion to assign Commissioner Johnson's letter of resignation to correspondence this evening and file it accordingly with regrets. I have a second on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Good. Adam, thank you very much for your service to us and our community. We appreciate it a great deal. And wish you the best, as I said. Under public hearings, we have no public hearing scheduled for tonight. We have one item of old business, which should consume most of our activity this evening. We are under consideration of an ordinance amendment for outside display sales, and we have revisions to that. We have discussed this repeatedly over the last several meetings. Mario, you have been excellent in all of the work that you've submitted in this regard, so I thank you very, very much for this. This has probably consumed more time than maybe is necessary, but I certainly appreciate it because it's certainly our desire to draft sound and sensible ordinance, and we thank you very much for your effort in that regard. Would you like to take it away then and introduce your revised proposal, and perhaps we could talk about that for a while?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So for tonight, based on our previous discussions, I have revamped this ordinance, and I like to think that right now I have a pretty good, an approach that I think more specifically addresses what the board's concerns and the village's concerns were. So rather than worrying about permanent versus temporary as terms of a time frame for the individual uses, it really focuses on the activities of the businesses. And on the one hand, having existing businesses, giving them the ability to place items in front of their businesses to a limited amount, a limited scale, versus a business whose primary activity just happens to involve the storage, sales, and display of items outside. And to that end, for that category of that type of business, the ordinance does, had some language with regards to that, but the main distinction before us tonight is that, is their location within our zoning districts. One being that, well, and we'll get into that in 1 second. So, beginning past the cover memo, I did change the way I present the ordinance language to you. So at the request, we have the current ordinance language for the definitions, which just defines open-air businesses, and then the proposed language. So the text that would be added and is underlined, and then just any text that was removed is just not indicated.
Good, thank you, Mario.
So for open-air business, the definition pretty much stays the same except for one word, shall. Open-air businesses shall include, that means it's a requirement that it be included to make that definition. I just changed it to may. So that just means that some of them may include some, but not the others. But then the key distinction, once again, is the idea of defining accessory outdoor display. So that's similar to other uses of the word accessory in the ordinance. Because, for example, when you have in a residential zoning district, the principal structure, or principal use of a site would be for the home, and a garage is an accessory to that. So this definition tends to say that the out-of-doors display of some goods by an existing business, which is clearly secondary to, but directly related with, and located upon the primary site of the principal business. Meaning, an existing business could place something outside if they so choose. And it's a type of activity for the existing business. It's not their primary thing, it's just they want to be able to display something to have greater effect. And so this would allow everyone to do that. And then the second definition, new definition, would be this outdoor display sales, where a business's primary activity is a consistent storage, display, or sale of goods that are not located within a fully enclosed building. Does that seem a little bit more clear-cut, seem to address some of our concerns from last time?
Commissioners?
What's the T?
T is temporary.
It's not in the, I know what T stands for, it's not in the key.
No, yeah, you're right, we have to change that in the key.
That'll be on all the pages.
Yep.
I should say, I assumed that it was T, the T stood for,
But you're absolutely right, Mo, you'd have to add T to the key. So that's another key distinction, is moving to the second page. The current ordinance, technically it says outdoor sales in our list of uses, even though it doesn't define it. So the first thing it does is just make that terminology consistent with our definitions, with the existing open-air business definition. So that would be a open-air business would require special use approval in the C2 district. Outdoor display sales, it's indicated as temporary, meaning they'd have to get a temporary use permit. And then accessory outdoor displays would be permitted by right use in the C1 transition. So businesses currently as listed, because forgive me, I couldn't recall if we wanted to spread that to the C2, but in the C1 transition, any business in the C1 transition, if they so choose, would just have the opportunity to display items outside.
I think we were reluctant last time to make a blanket spread across all of the various zones or districts, and stick strictly with C1 transition at this time. And if we need to revisit this later, we can certainly do that.
excuse me.
So once again, feel free to just interrupt me if you have any questions or concerns about the way this is oriented now. So that would be our use chart. And then finally, moving on, I just listed the current regulations for the open-air businesses that are currently allowed. And then for proposed language, once again, keeping the idea of them separate, the open-air businesses, there would be no changes to that language that's there. And then we would focus with the outdoor display sales regulations for the businesses in a C1 transition. And so these general standards address the fact that they submit to us a plan indicating, where everything's going to be displayed, their display areas. They could not display anything in the clear vision zones, so therefore we have to make sure that, cars have the ability to see and make sure to regulate the safety of, that these items don't increase any danger from vehicle display. Yeah,
It's in the current ordinance, so this is nothing we did today, but I don't know what it means. 4.1.23B, the display shall be supervised and shall not be maintained outdoors during hours when the business is closed.
yep.
What does that mean?
That means that technically that would require people to bring things inside.
Bring them inside and not leave them outside.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's in the current language.
Okay.
Yep.
We were wrong.
But that's just for businesses that fall into the category of an
Of the
open
open
area
area.
business.
Yep.
And so that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. It's just businesses that are in this category.
Right.
Is that
There would
correct?
be businesses located in the C2 and attempting to get a special use approval to do primary outdoor display, open air business.
And many businesses that we have in the village right now comply with that requirement.
In the C2.
And they
I would think-
operate that way.
I would think those businesses that are in the C2, yes, they would, because they bring them in.
Right.
Notably, in going back to 4.1.28, that requirement is not listed here. So it would allow the items to remain outdoors consistently, and that's part of the definition, and that would not have to be consistently supervised. We just give the property owner, the business operator, the choice of if that's what they want to, how they want to operate. And they feel that you can, they feel that's appropriate for the type of items they're selling, then that's their right. So going under the other requirements, once again, clear vision, they would have to abide by any lighting standards. So that means they wouldn't be required to light the display area yard, but if they so choose, they would have to.
Correct.
Just do everything in accordance with our lighting standards.
Correct.
Now, so in terms of floor area and determining how big a space would be occupied by this, once again, it kind of gives the property owner, business owner, the discretion in terms of so the combination of all buildings and outdoor display area should not exceed more than 40% of the lot area. So that's a number we came up with, that hasn't changed, but, that's generally consistent with our other open space, floor area requirements. So there's that. The displays couldn't be in the required front yard or the required street side yard. So that means they could be located in the rear yard, they could be located in the side yard, but not the required street side yard.
Mario, this, item 5 here was one of the lines I had questions on. And because you said any required front yard, so I'm assuming required front yard is a term that you're familiar with in terms that means something special to you, is that correct?
That's correct, and it's also a term in the zoning ordinance. So what it is, it's the 5-foot minimum front yard setback, that's the required front yard. So you're required to, at a minimum, have X number of feet. So once you get past that, then it could still be, for example, if between the front property line and the building, there was 30 feet, and we had a 10-foot minimum yard setback. So 10 feet, the first 10 feet is the required front yard. From the 10-foot mark back, an additional 20 feet to the 30 feet to the house, technically, that's still the front yard, but it's not the required front yard.
All right,
That
good.
just has to be spaced, that just happens to be spaced because the property owner chose to place their building an additional 20 feet back. So in theory, businesses could have these display areas directly in front of their structures.
Since you referenced the other articles and section numbers for clarification purposes, is it possible to do
Yep,
that in this one as well?
absolutely.
In the current ordinance under open air business, we actually state no closer than 20 feet from any vehicular accessible street. And that's not in the 4.1.28?
No, we would rely on the schedule regs that says on a side street, you typically have an increased side yard setback comparative to just if your property was abutting other private property, then you typically have a decent sized yard, so that way there's enough light and air and that sort of thing, you're not right on top of each other. But when there's a street, that's always increased. So rather than specifically calling out 20 feet, we're just saying whatever the ordinance currently says for side yard setbacks, side street yard setbacks, excuse me.
And if I understood correctly, Commissioner Leslie said, please add the citation that defines those two things to that line item 5. Is that correct? Leslie, is that what you said?
That is.
Thank you. I think that's a good idea too, Mario. I like that, because I was going to, part of my question here was, that somebody who reads these requirements in this ordinance, are they going to understand that required front yard is an actual thing? It's not just just a group of words here, but it actually means something.
And the way it typically goes, if a person is experienced with zoning ordinances and has worked with them in the past.
Sure.
Then they'll most likely be aware of them, but whenever they submit an application, no matter, regardless of their familiarity, the village will advise them, I was like, well, this is your required front yard, this is your required side yard. You need to have at least this much space between you. So if they propose something and it meets it, then they're good, but if they don't meet it,
Excellent.
we revise them, we tell them, you gotta change it.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that clarity, Mario.
But in the C1 transition district, what is the required front yard setback?
I'm turning on my computer,
Because I think,
can't get it right
I
off the
think
top
it
of my
says
head.
5 feet.
It might be, it might be.
And I think that's very close.
Remember, it's 5 feet, it would be 5 feet from the
From the lot line.
property line. Yeah,
Right.
You're right, right. So that's, yeah, it's true.
Does have a memory.
Because there are some places in the village where the lot line is the curb.
Right, but remember, we'd be talking, do you think that situation exists in the C1 transition?
I don't know, because I haven't, and I wouldn't say that the property next to me is the same as my property. There's some weird stuff in the
Oh,
old
yeah,
village, and
Yep.
No,
I know, who'd have thought?
it's not possible. I don't know, Mo, I'm not opposed to the way it's worded. And I'm not sure if I want to try to make it more complicated by adding a stipulation there that's over and above what is already written into the ordinance.
Chuck, is
afraid-
your lot line the interior side of the sidewalk?
Well, what I was gonna say is I own on the east side, or on the west side of the road, I basically own all of the C1 transition, and it's all from the sidewalk.
The interior side of the sidewalk?
Yeah, because all those pieces had to be surveyed when I bought them, and they all showed the inside of the sidewalk.
But you know what I'm saying about how their
Chuck,
lot
why don't you
lines.
go ahead and step up to the podium so we can gather this information for the recording?
I'm sorry, Chuck.
That's all
making
right,
you get
yeah.
it.
State your name and your address like you always do, and then Mo, ask the question again, if you will, please.
2681 Hadley Road, Lapeer, Michigan.
Go ahead, Mo.
On your property, it's, and the multiple properties that you own on the west side of 24 north and south of Burdick, it's the interior side
Unique stuff.
of the sidewalk where your lot line is?
Yes.
But have you seen the examples where I'm saying where they're in different spots?
I don't think you have much of that on 24, but you
Okay.
probably do when you get into other neighborhoods. Those rough platted differently.
Right.
Do you want to, anything else, do you want to push on that, Mo?
No, I'm all right with it.
All right. Go ahead, Mario,
Okay.
continue if you will, please.
And just to clarify, it would be 5 feet, so it's a
Okay.
5-foot
Okay.
setback. Then as we go on, so parent number 6, it would require that any display, and it does say display area. So if a display area is adjacent to residentially used or zoned property, they shall provide an opaque fence 6 feet in height. The way the draft is right now. It just says in compliance with their standards, so just in terms of design and material and that sort of thing. They couldn't put barbed wire on the top of it and that sort of thing. But it would require them, if the display area is directly adjacent, so if they put it on the side of their structure, not directly adjacent, well, yeah, so it specifically would require the display area to have a fence against residential. But in theory, if someone had the display area and it ended 30 feet from the rear lot line, then they wouldn't be having a fence right now.
Explain that a little bit further.
So you have your lot, and you have your building, a commercial building,
Yeah, we do.
C1, and then you draw a display area, you have your outdoor area, and you use split rail fence to just define it, just because you want to, corral people. But if your split rail fence isn't adjacent to the way it's worded, if it isn't adjacent to the residential property, meaning if there's at least 5 foot, or even technically, if someone wants to finagle the situation, they left 1 foot behind there, then I guess they technically could, they would not be required to have a fence. So I'm a little apprehensive about that as I play scenarios out in my head, but technically that's the way it is written right now. In theory, you could do something where it'd be, if they place a display area in the required rear yard. Now, the problem with that is that in the C1 transition, we don't have one. It's a 0-foot rear yard setback for principal buildings, and they could, because there's a C1 transition, it's directly related to downtown, that we anticipate that someone, property owner having the ability to put a building all the way up to the lot line, apparently, in the rear yard. I don't know how you feel about that, but currently, they would only have to put up a fence if the items were displayed directly adjacent to a residentially zoned or used property.
That's what you decided at the last meeting.
Right?
Are we leaving too much wiggle room there? I mean, what exactly, what is,
Well.
what does directly, what does directly adjacent mean?
I know.
mean, that's, what is, what is,
Is, it depends on your definition of what. is.
Exactly.
But because I actually have those conversations more often than you think with applicants, splitting the hairs of what
Exactly.
adjacent means.
But isn't this something that, because they have to provide site plan and description and come to the planning commission for approval for temporary use, wouldn't that be addressed at that time?
Yes, like, for example, when an application is submitted, since it's a temporary use, we would review, and we would, if we said in our determination, these displays are adjacent to, even if the applicant drew like a 1-foot boundary around their display area to get away without, we would still, interpret it as being adjacent. But then you have the consultant saying one thing, the applicant saying, no, I'm not adjacent to the property because I have 1 foot of space between my display.
Exactly.
Then it depends upon the board. You're absolutely right, Leslie. It would be the planning commission making that determination to decide whether a fence would be required or not.
I guess in my mind, it was if
Right.
the properties with the storage was
Adjacent,
next to
right,
a property that was residential, then they needed the fence.
right.
Not,
And it
not that item was leaning against the property line, but.
Right. And so that's the reason, that's an issue with this wording, because I worded it as any display area. If you wanted a fence around those properties, you would say any parcel containing with a display area adjacent to. So then the parcel bound, like you'd say, Mo, then it would be any parcel. But then again, then you get the idea that, what if they only displayed their items in front of the building and they couldn't be seen from the residential? Then you're making the property owner put up a fence, even though technically the items might not even be seen from the residential area. That's the opposite argument to that.
Can you imagine any scenario in which that hair splitting would go on, or some application that we wouldn't know about and wouldn't be able to regulate through the planning commission? I mean, it seems like that net would catch those unique situations.
Right. It's all up to you if you want the ordinance to do the work or if you want the board to do the work. If the board, you want a little bit of discretion, not discretion, but if you wanted the board to make that determination, what adjacent is, then the consultant would make a consideration. The applicant would state their case, whether they think a fence is onerous or whether they think a fence is fine, and then you would make that determination.
I think that would be my preference, Mario. If we try to lock this down too tight via words, not that there's anybody out there that would do this, but it's potential that someone would find a way to wiggle around the words. They always do.
Right.
And so I'd much rather have the opportunity to be able to look at a site plan and say, this is right, this is exactly what we had in mind, or this is not. And try it that way.
Right, yeah.
Do you agree, commissioners?
I agree.
Okay. Go ahead, Mario.
Some of this language does replicate what the open air business language is, such as display area should be kept clean and void of litter at all times.
Okay.
Just simply.
Definitely.
And then we get into the time frame issues. I worded it as the temporary use approval granted by the planning commission shall expire on December 31st in the year in which the planning commission grants the approval. And then the applicant may apply for an administrative extension in accordance with below. So this is the issue where that sounds okay. And then item 9 is another example of taking language from the other section and stating they must maintain it properly. And then we get into the administrative section, extension, paragraph. So basically the first sentence does indicate that it gives the planning commission a choice. They can either say, the applicant that has come in, we can let them just get their administrative extensions all the time, or if you don't grant them that ability, they would have to come back to you. That's one additional power, that's just a leftover of the language we put in. And then, so then if they do, then it goes to the, if you do grant them that ability, then they would just go to the village manager on January 1st, because their permit would expire December 31st. And then as long as the village manager determines the applicant is kept operating in keeping with conditions of approval, and the continued operation shall not negatively impact existing adjacent land uses, then they would get a 1-year extension. But it also, the village manager still has the discretion to request an extension. If they receive a request for an extension, if the village manager doesn't feel like they can grant it, they can kick it back to the planning commission.
Okay.
Are there fees involved with this, or just the permit itself?
This doesn't anticipate any fees in the ordinance. Typically, you'd want to leave that power, and actually, I think the village council is the only body that can can administer the fees.
I think that's true.
Obviously, for any permit, a fee is pretty much standard, simply because, it takes, it costs administrative staff time to
So
process
if we
it.
give blessing to this ordinance the way it's written, then it goes to council, and council can implement fees
Yep.
in accordance with what we've addressed.
Yeah, it would be another line item added to their, the fee schedule, like as a new permit that would have to get reviewed. And there might already be a line item for temporary use permit anyway. But temporary use permit administrative review might be the new line item that council would have to address.
Okay.
So then that would be it for the business that is an outdoor display sales. That's their regulations. And then finally, I didn't want to necessarily just open the door wide open for businesses doing this accessory outdoor display as a side thing. So basically, an existing business shall be permitted to have an area for outdoor display of items, provided that the area comply with the following standards, meaning an accessory display area should not be greater than 10% of the gross floor area of the principal structure. That's in keeping with the idea that it's not, the primary business is displaying things outside and selling them outside. It's just it's a side, it's ancillary to the principle, everyone selling everything in, a business, selling something inside. Excuse me. And then just in terms of safety, making sure the outdoor display area should not be located in the required clear vision zone. And then I wanted to make sure that they didn't necessarily utilize parking spaces that were at a premium. So the paragraph C says the accessory outdoor display area should not occupy any vehicle parking space or aisles necessary to meet the minimum required standard for the principal use. So that means if it gives a business owner the opportunity, they're required to have 5 spaces. If they have 10, then they could use those other 10 because they're technically above and beyond what we require as a minimum. So it gives them that opportunity. If they don't have, if they're just at the minimum requirement, if they're required to have 5, they only have 5, then they probably should find some other place to put it. Because in theory, they're displaying items and they're going to drum up business, there'll be more people on there, and you don't want to take away parking spaces.
Do you have an example of an accessory outdoor display?
Really, it would be as the forgive me, the business that's on Burdick that would just put out lawnmowers on the lawn.
Okay.
I think that would be, because they have a larger indoor business, and they just want to put a couple lawnmowers outside, that's minimal. And then they feel that they can't just leave those things because they could literally walk away. I mean, so they bring them back in at the end of the day. And it doesn't necessarily require, this one doesn't get into that fine requirement. For example, if someone puts out a pallet of salt, and if they don't want to have to haul it in or get the high-low and bring it in every day, technically they could leave it out there. Because it's it's ancillary, it's secondary to their primary business of getting people to come inside and buy all the other plethora of items they sell. They just have to put the salt out or the mulch or something that's seasonal. Yes, ma'am.
I thought I read it here, but now I don't see it. I own a business in the C1 Transition District, and I sell musical instruments. Can my outdoor sales be topsoil?
The definition says, let me get it right. The definition says, display of some goods by an existing business which is clearly secondary to.
That's where I saw
But
it.
directly related with.
Okay.
And located upon. So it has to be on their property, like, for example, another thing, just in case, because you never know, if someone wanted to put a piano out in front of some other business farther away and says, come to our piano store farther away, they can't do that. It has to be located on their site,
I thought I saw it in there somewhere, and then I couldn't find it quick, so,
and it has to be directly related, so.
okay.
You could sell, the keys, but or the strings, but not the piano. Well,
Unless I was, this Chuck Snyder, 2681 Hadley Road, Lapeer, Michigan. Unless I was dozing off, I don't see where we discussed point number 9 under outdoor display sales. I think that paragraph needs some work, because we need to give the village managers some more authority. So what this says is the owner of the display shall maintain responsibility to all goods and other display elements in order to protect the public from safety hazards associated with the display. Well, I don't think that's the issue. The issue is that the owner of this display needs to have a responsibility to maintain his display consistent with the site plan that was approved by the planning commission. Forget about hazardous materials. He needs to conform to the site plan. In the event the village manager becomes aware of, forget about hazardous conditions, a deviation from the site plan, then the manager shall advise the business owner to cease and desist operation of the display. The guy isn't conforming to a site plan, so he's told, you need to conform, and we're gonna give you 30 days to conform. If you don't conform, we're gonna pull your temporary permit. You need to give the village manager that authority. He has no authority in this whole document to do that. Then it says he's gonna refer the perceived condition to the planning commission. Well, he's the one that identified a commission that they were violating their site plan, so why would he give it to you? If he pulls their permit, that person has to come back to you and and reapply for a permit. So basically, there's nothing in here that says, hey, if it doesn't conform to the permit, what happens? I'm saying what happens is the village manager says, hey, you're not complying with your permit. I'm giving you 30 days to comply, or I'm pulling your permit. And if you want your permit back, you gotta go back to the planning commission to get it, because you didn't do what you said you were gonna do. That paragraph only talks about hazardous conditions.
Thank you, Chuck. Commissioners?
I have questions about the permit and how the permit's gonna work, because I'm all about the application. And I do wanna go over, so, okay, now I've got my permit, it's July 1st, I've got my permit, I'm good till the 21st, till December 31st. Except, all of a sudden, I've got a piano out there. So, okay, the piano's gotta go. So what do we do? I don't disagree with Chuck that in some things, the village manager should be able to just handle it. But part of that, I think there could also be some necessary tickets depending on what the violation is, a ticket and the withdrawal of the permit. I just want to know how it's gonna to flow, and I'm not sure I'm 100% on that yet.
Now it's not flowing at all. Nothing in there.
Technically, any business that's approved has to abide by their site plan. And if they don't abide by their site plan, there's regulations in the zoning ordinance that requires that. Now, but that doesn't mean you couldn't change this language, because that's something that could be, it wouldn't hurt. And then the only thing you really have to concern yourself with is whether compliance with the site plan is the primary issue, and that would cover hazardous, or if hazardous is a little safety hazards, yeah, I guess.
Cover everything.
Mario, I got where you were going with this.
Right.
And I think that paragraph 9 needs to be in there, just like it said. But interestingly enough, I agree with Mr. Schneider also, because I think that there should be similar language in here that states compliance with the site plan. You know, you have an approved set of behavior that's required here, and you're expected to stay within the confines of that behavior, because that's what we approved. If you step outside the boundaries of that behavior, then this is what takes place. So it's almost verbatim what's in 9. We just need, I think we need another paragraph that states all of, pretty much everything that's here, but talks about compliance to the the stipulations set forth in the site plan.
Yeah, we could do.
And so, I think if you were to add another paragraph there, I think that would cover us on both fronts, because I think the hazard, public safety is our first and foremost concern. And so that has to be there. But the other thing is that we want to make sure that when we give somebody approval to behave in this way, that they play by the rules. And that if you don't play by the rules, this is what's going to happen. Village manager will pull your permit, and in order to get it reinstated, you have to come back and talk to us.
Should be stated right in the permit.
Yeah. So,
In the interest of clarity, I could definitely see adding a paragraph would be just the most direct method to solve the situation. I technically, in my mind, I could come up with language to modify paragraph 9 saying, the owner of the display shall maintain compliance with site plan, including but not limited to minimal, well, yeah, you're right. Well, I think maybe adding paragraphs is just the best. That's the best.
To me personally, it doesn't, I don't mind if you break it up into 2 paragraphs.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
to me, it's 2 distinct things that we're shooting for here. 1, we're looking at public safety, and 2, we're looking at making sure that the business owners comply with the agreed upon set of behavior.
Yeah, no, you're right. We can just add that.
And, to me, the 2 paragraphs are almost identical. All you have to do is change what they're pointed at, to me, for the most part. Commissioners? Ms. Leslie?
Don't mind that.
I don't know, it might be because of the writing that I do, but I like the idea of having one paragraph that separates the 2 definitions as opposed to 2 almost identical paragraphs, but it doesn't matter to me. I think clarifying that is a good thing, and if that is incorporated into the rest of the language here, I don't see any other concerns outside of that.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Deeg, any comments on this?
No, I would agree with that. And as far as the formatting, I mean, it's kind of a coin flip for me, as long as it gets in there.
Mario, you're a very good writer. And everything you bring to us has been smithed very well, I think. If you believe that you can cover this in a single paragraph, and just as long as it's clear,
Right.
crystal clear, that there's 2 things we're looking at. And if you, feel free to do that in 1 paragraph. If you feel like you need 2 to cover those, I'll leave it to your discretion.
Okay. Thank you. I do want to get back, I don't know if I addressed Mo's concern specifically with regards to the process. Because in my mind, they have their permit, it expires on the 31st, and then the language in paragraph B, where the village manager is considering the approval, says the applicant such an extension shall be reviewed and granted by the village manager if, in the village manager's determination, the applicant is operating in keeping with all conditions of approval originally granted by the planning commission. So in that case, if the nursery is putting pianos out, then that's not in compliance. The village manager would have to make that determination. That,
Yes.
Get to your-
I think it's good for, because I'm all about flowcharts. And I'm just trying to make one up that follows, because I think the council, it'd be so much easier to give them a flowchart and say, here you go. And we're gonna have to send this to council.
right?
Whether it's included in the ordinance or not, I think council can use a flowchart.
The flow chart is good for applicants because it's something you can attach to the,
Right.
to the application. And so basically it would be applicant submits information for outdoor display sales. Next it goes down to planning commission reviews, and then it can 2 arrows out. 1, planning commission approves for 1 year with no administrative extensions, or 2, planning commission approves with administrative extensions. And then at the end, the first one, December 31st, permit expires, no extension. permit, December 31st, permit expires, applicant submits to village manager, and then that would go in a circle. Then the village manager reviews, if they approve it, then it goes back.
You know, when they approve for their extension, they're gonna wanna do that 30 days in advance, because Dan's not gonna do that on January 1st, go through all these applications. And
That's definitely something that you're right, and then I think that would be a little bit more of a policy issue, rather than
Right.
necessarily
Right.
put it in the ordinance. Because, you know, one village manager might say, oh, I can handle it the week of, and then, because one person comes in. But if 50 people come in, the next village
well,
manager.
but they're all expiring on December 31st.
Right, exactly.
So in theory, if we've got 8 of them,
Right. And in theory, that burden is upon the property owner, the business owner, to say, my permit's expired, I have to make sure that I get it in time to do it. And then it also becomes an enforcement issue too, because it's not, chances are that someone's not gonna be out there on January 1st saying, you violated your permit, therefore we're pulling it and you cannot no longer operate. They're not gonna, I know that's a little bit more of a gray area that we probably shouldn't be dependent upon, but it's you know, chances are it's not gonna happen. But
So we're going to have one more overview of this before it goes to council in January then.
Well, actually, I would recommend, if you're okay with this language, that you schedule a public hearing. So at your first meeting in January, you could have a public hearing. And because a public hearing isn't supposed to be necessarily about your final version of the language, you want the public, the opportunity to comment, because they might have good ideas, and you might want to consider. So even though I know we don't have paragraph 10 in here, that you would be looking at it for the first time, but the public be looking at the whole thing for the first time. So after that public hearing, you know, you don't always, after a public hearing, you don't have to send it directly a recommendation to council. You could say, whoa, they brought up good ideas, we got to back up and have one more meeting. Or if the public says, this is the best ordinance I've ever heard, you guys are awesome, then you can make a recommendation to council, and then.
because we get that all the time.
I love being carried around the room on people's shoulders.
So to make sure that the council's concerns that this get addressed in January, I don't know if it says January 1st of the year or what, but if we have a public hearing, then, for our first meeting in January, then they can consider it at their.
Which would be the
Well,
7th of
they have the
January.
potential to consider it. They might not, because once again, we might want to tweak it again. Or they might, once again, it might be perfect, and it might go right to council in January.
I would like to send a rough draft to council.
Oh, sure.
So that we can address the moratorium, which expires at the end of the month, and have that extended however long we think we might need to.
Yeah, if they think that they need to. Yeah, so what we could do is send a memorandum saying this language is potentially being scheduled for a public hearing. And you can still have the public hearing, and then it's a council can make the determination whether they feel they need to do the moratorium or not.
Well, that, January 1st is the first meeting
For us,
for us.
No, that can't be.
yeah, we must move it like the next day or something, right? To January 2nd. Have we well,
January 2nd's a Wednesday.
are there any other meetings in,
January 15th will be our first meeting in 2019, whatever year next year is, 2019.
January 15th.
well, that brings up the good point that we probably should, move well, you probably should have adopted your calendar of meetings.
Oh, I have a question. Are we gonna have a meeting on the 18th?
That's a better question. Because that's what I was, yeah, technically,
We're going to have to.
or.
Do we have enough
it's not
time to
unheard of
schedule a?
It's not necessarily a statutory requirement, it's a courtesy to let everyone aware. So, and you're in keeping with your schedule that you've done consistently over time, so it's not like you're changing it to like Saturdays at 3. If we still meet consistently with our schedule, other communities have gone into the first of the year and adopted their schedule then. It's up to you, though. You definitely
But we don't
could
have
you
enough
could
time to have a public hearing on the 18th.
That is correct. That is correct. We couldn't have the public hearing on the 18th, we could have the meeting just to schedule our, set our calendar. Up to your
All right.
discretion. But I would still recommend scheduling the public hearing, and it would merely be you directing us to schedule a public hearing for January. You just say January, and then we'll publish it appropriately.
I don't think we have to adopt our calendar of meetings. We can just cancel the meeting on the 1st because it's New Year's Day.
Right.
Right.
And note that our first regular meeting of 2019 will be the 15th, which is our regular meeting, and we can schedule it for the 15th.
And then when would the next council meeting be?
The council meets on the 8th and on the 22nd
Oh, okay.
of January, but we're still meeting probably 17 more times in 2018 because we're just like that.
You say so.
The council will meet on the 11th and probably not the 25th,
Right.
but probably another day in there.
So I know that come the 18th, we're going to adopt our schedule. But do we
Yeah,
have to
want to.
wait until the 15th to schedule the public hearing, or can we do that tonight?
You can do that tonight.
We're not gonna, are we gonna meet on the 15th? Do we have to, is there anything to meet on the 15th?
The 18th, you mean,
18th.
December.
Or the 18th?
Only-
December 18th.
The only thing that would be pressing would be to set a schedule for next year.
To do our dates.
And that is not absolutely required. It's just something that we could do if we wanted to be good and make sure that we went into the new year with a set schedule.
Gary says
Or can
no.
council just adopt all the,
Skype.
Terry, does the clerk have an opinion?
Actually, yes, we have the calendars on the agenda for the 11th for all of the.
All the
Oh,
boards.
there you go.
So,
so we don't have to meet on the 15th,
18th.
18th.
So we can schedule our public hearing for the 15th of January.
All right? Do you make a
Have a
motion?
motion?
Do you want a motion for that, Mo?
Well, I still have other questions before I make that motion.
Okay.
Do I? I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing on the outdoor business, open air business, outdoor display
Outside display,
sales.
outside display sales.
Accessory outdoor display sales ordinance. Getting them all for January 15th at 7 PM or soon thereafter, and to forward a rough draft of the proposed ordinance to the village council so they can begin their review.
Second.
Madam Secretary, there's a motion in there somewhere.
A long one.
If you're able to dig out
It's a combo.
the correct terminology for that when you write it up, I'd appreciate it. Good job, Mo.
I nailed it.
You covered absolutely everything.
Bases are covered.
All right, we have a motion on the table to set a public meeting, public hearing, to consider the ordinance amendment for the outside display sales, set for January 15th, is that correct?
Yep.
Correct.
And I have a second on that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Good, we are scheduled for a public hearing then. All right, is there anything else that anybody would like to add in regards to our consideration of this ordinance amendment?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember what it was. Terry, can you make sure Joe, that's his name, that Joe knows to put this on next Tuesday's agenda for the council as a probably just in a correspondence?
I can
But-
prepare a cover letter and
Okay.
with the ordinance and forward it to Joe.
And then I also want the moratorium on the agenda, extension for the moratorium.
That we're requesting it.
I mean, because the moratorium expires December 31st.
I understand. And so the planning commission is requesting that the council would extend the moratorium 30 days to give us time to be able to,
I think it's gonna be more like 90 by the time the ordinance would be written and in effect.
well, I'll tell you what, I'll let them,
Okay,
we're just requesting an extension.
fine.
Is that fair, Terry? Can you write that up?
Make it be so.
Make it so.
I can get a pencil.
Do we have to have a motion for a request to the council? Is that necessary, or are we just doing it?
I'll make a motion to request council extend the moratorium until the ordinance is adopted.
Any second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. All right. Madam Secretary, a motion on the table for a request to the Village Council to extend the moratorium on outdoor display sales. And I have a second for that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Good. That recommendation will be forwarded to the council. We thank you very much. We have no business, no new business tonight. Any public comment? Our public has walked out. Consultant and administrative comments? Mario, is there anything you'd like to add?
At your January 15th meeting, I'll have your annual report, which that's the summary of your activities, and then I'll also be presenting a draft of the action plan, just as we have it, so that way we can discuss it then.
All right, thank you very much. Madam Secretary, any comments? Commissioner comments? Jack Curtis is not here to give us an Oxford Township planning. Rose, do you have any updates for ZBA?
Yes, at last night's meeting, we had 77 South Gillespie that we approved the variances for.
Okay,
And also, we need alternates on the ZBA, so if anybody is interested in being a ZBA member, please contact us and we'll get it going.
okay,
And one more thing I was thinking of. Oh, our annual meetings are the first meeting in January.
okay,
So the planning commissions and the ZBAs both.
okay, thank you. Pete is not here, so we don't have a DDA update. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Oh, I have one more thing.
Go ahead.
Council is, again, reviewing the requirements, the ability to opt in or opt out of marijuana sales. The law changed.
Yes.
Before, we didn't have to do anything to opt out. Now we have to decide, we have to actually make a verbal decision. Are we in or are we out? So we tabled at the last meeting. We're going to be discussing again at the next council meeting.
Good. That should be an interesting discussion.
It always is.
I would bet. And so I would now then entertain a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
At 7:57, I so moved to adjourn.
All right. Madam Secretary, I have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.